And this is London, but broadcasting to you, of course, all over the world, thanks to the wonders of the internet and SputnikNews.com. We're on FM 105.5 are the magic numbers in Washington, D.C., and on AM coast to coast across the United States of America. But we're also a radio show with pictures, which is quite unique, actually. You can watch us, as many of you are, in unprecedented numbers on the following portals and platforms. You can watch us on Facebook, on George Galloway Official, and on RT.com and RTUKnews.com, and indeed almost all RT portals nowadays. You can watch, of course, on YouTube, on George Galloway Official, and again on almost all of the RT platforms. If you are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, please share, share, and share with the audience. We want to build 1 million viewers and listeners just as quickly as possible. I suspect that tonight we may well get close to that for the very first time, because these are very dramatic, portentous, somber, and potentially catastrophic times. What happened in the early hours of Friday morning in the airport precinct at Baghdad International Airport to an internationally accredited diplomat with a diplomatic passport, a general of the Iranian armed forces, and many others, 9 others, were obliterated in seconds by a drone strike boasted of immediately by the United States government. The Pentagon was careful to insist in the first sentence that the action was at the direction of the president. So they made it clear even before Donald Trump, with his rather obscure, low-resolution tweeting of an American flag, made it clear that this was an official operation. Let's get the first thing out of the way. This was an entirely illegal act of international terrorism. Remember that when you hear reference to the T word. This was a terrorist attack by a state, not just any state, but a state that has a seat on the Permanent Security Council of the United Nations, on an accredited diplomat on a diplomatic mission of another member state of the United Nations. This was a state-sponsored extrajudicial murder. It's important that this is kept in mind, because you will already have heard all kinds of quasi-mystical exculpations of this crime. There is no ground in international law for the action that the United States government took on Friday. It was an act of piracy. It was an act of international terrorism. The second thing that we have to put in place before proceeding to debate this matter is that the proximate cause of the events on Friday morning were not the attack on the US Embassy in Baghdad by Iraqi citizens just a few days before, but were the withdrawal from the Iran nuclear treaty by the United States of America, which ripped up a solemn and binding treaty that Iran was abiding by impeccably, ripped it up unilaterally, and began a round of not sanctions, but absolute embargo on the Iranian people, 80 million strong, half of them young people, many of them children, now suffering, even dying as a result of American sanctions, which characteristically they have sought to extraterritorialize, to force other people into implementing their unilaterally imposed sanctions. That's where this begins. There was a treaty. It was working well. Donald Trump ripped it up. And to the horror of every other party to the treaty, including Great Britain and the European Union and the permanent five of the Security Council, minus the United States. All other actions have flowed ineluctably from that. The United States has been effectively trying to strangle the civilian population of Iran, 80 million of them, so that they rise up against their government and overthrow it in a classic regime change operation. Classic even for Iran. In 1953, the United States and Britain ignominiously played exactly the same role in trying to secure the overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mr. Mossadegh. It's a repeat of the Operation Mongoose of 1953, which seeks to bring about entirely illegitimately, illegally, the overthrow of a sovereign government, a member state of the United Nations. Now, the events at the US Embassy only happened because Donald Trump bombed a camp belonging to a part of the Iraqi National Army. The Popular Mobilization Forces are a legitimate, accredited part of the Iraqi armed forces. I remind you that until today, and I'll come back to that, the United States was in alliance with the government of Iraq, whose armed forces Donald Trump attacked. He killed 25 people. By the way, many of them were Yazidis. Yes, the very Yazidis over whom we cried such crocodile tears when they were in the grisly hands of ISIS, the so-called Islamic State. The bombing of the PMF camp killed 25 people, and when the crowd had finished burying them, they headed for the US Embassy. They did some peripheral damage to the US Embassy. General Suleiman had nothing whatsoever to do with the events at the American Embassy. He was not in Iraq when these events took place. It was not Iranians who were attacking the US Embassy. It was Iraqis. Now, the circumstances which govern the presence of US troops and other forces, and British forces, by the way, 700 British forces in Iraq, now cowering down for what will be the inevitable Iranian retaliation, are strictly governed by agreement with the government of Iraq, which decided today that the United States forces, and indeed all of the coalition forces, must leave Iraq. Now, you'll recall we invaded Iraq to introduce democracy. The Iraqi government is a democratically elected government. It has just ordered the United States to leave. It will therefore be, again, an act of international lawlessness if the United States refuses to leave a country whose sovereign, legitimate government has just ordered them to leave. Now let's come on to the more dramatic, more portentous issues. As you will have seen today from the footage, if you are on social media, of the biggest funeral in the history of the world, General Suleiman has been received, his remains have been received by millions of people, millions in every city in Iran through which the coffin has now passed. There were millions in Awaz, there were millions in Mashhad, and there will be perhaps uncountable millions in Tehran, where he will meet his final resting place. Bear that in mind too, because Donald Trump likes to convince you that the Iranian people are against their government, just looking for an opportunity to overthrow it. That if the United States were to overthrow it, they, like the occupation forces in Iraq, would be greeted by flowers and sweets. Anyone who still believes that, after the scenes of these funerals today in Iran, needs their head carefully examined by a doctor. It's absolutely self-evident that this murder of Soleimani has brought the Iranian people together, left, right, and center, reformist and hardliner. Even the nationalist Iranians outside of the country who have absolutely nothing in common with the governance of the Islamic Republic. This is an affront to all Iranians. Only paid stooges to be accepted from that statement. Virtually every Iranian in the world is outraged and united by this act of Donald Trump. Now, President Rouhani, my former distinguished constituent in Glasgow, now the President of Iran, visited the family home of General Soleimani earlier today. His weeping daughters asked President Rouhani, "Who will avenge our father?" And instantly the president, a moderate, replied, "Don't worry about that for a second. All of us will be his avengers." So that's why I say that there is nothing more certain in this life than that the Iranians will retaliate in a proportional way. And what would be a proportional way to the murder of the second most important person in the country? Effectively, like a foreign government boasting that it had murdered the heir to the throne of Great Britain, for example, or the crown prince of anywhere in the country. What would be a proportionate response to that? Well, it will not be a stray minor rocket attack on an American camp in Kenya, though that did happen today, or a stray rocket attack on American troops' barracks in Iraq itself. It will be very, very much more significant than that. Neither will it be hidden by the Iranians. They will not seek to blame it on proxies. It will be their act or acts, and they will make it clear to the world that they have carried it out. And for it to be remotely proportionate, it will have to be extremely big. Now, that will inevitably beget a further response from the United States. Earlier today, Donald Trump tweeted this: "The United States just spent $2 trillion on military equipment. We are the biggest and by far the best," in capitals, "in the world!" Exclamation mark. If Iran attacks an American base or any American, we will be sending some of that brand new, beautiful equipment their way and without hesitation. Their way without hesitation. So the scene is set. If any American or any American base is attacked by Iran, it's game on. It's all out war between the United States and it hopes its allies, one of which is guaranteed, but only one is guaranteed, that being Netanyahu's Israel, for whom all of this is a splendid and welcome distraction from Mr. Netanyahu's impending imprisonment. Now, if Iran were to attack anywhere, it's my guess that it will not be in Iraq, because the situation in Iraq has moved decisively in Iran's favor. The Americans are being expelled from the country. Many of the hitherto disparate political factions in Iraq are coming together in defiance of the United States' action on sovereign Iraqi soil. It's my sincere belief that neither will it be in Israel, although Iran's rhetoric often hypes its potential to strike Israel. I don't believe that that will be the site of Iran's retaliation. The site of Iran's retaliation, in my view, will be in the Persian Gulf, where, to use a Rumsfeldism, there is a target-rich environment. The Saudi dictatorship is host to a truly gigantic American military presence. It's also, of course, one of the world's biggest oil producers. It's very near Iran. It has an ancient enmity between the two countries. It has a Shiite religious minority in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, which may very well rise up against the tyranny of the Wahhabist dictatorship in Riyadh, which routinely crucifies and murders members of that Shiite minority, which is more than 20% of the population of Saudi Arabia. If Iran hits Saudi Arabia and sends its oil fields into Australian levels of fire, then there will not be a barrel of oil to be procured in the world at less than $500. That's my prediction. An oil price shock that will destabilize the world economy instantly. The price of oil already steadily rising before a shot has been fired by the Iranians in retaliation. But there are others. There are others, in particular, like Bahrain. It's my belief, I have no internal information on this, of course, but I do know about military and political events. And I do know the demography and the topography of the Middle East very well. It's my belief that the Iranian attack in response to the murder of General Soleimani will take place in Bahrain, where an exceedingly target-rich environment exists, where you have an overwhelming Shiite minority population ruled over by a tiny and ridiculous comic opera, Gilbert and Sullivan Sunni monarchy, which only exists because across the causeway in Saudi Arabia, it has limitless support from Saudi Arabia. So if you attack Bahrain, you're also attacking Saudi Arabia. But here's the rub. The US 7th Fleet is based in Bahrain, as is, thanks to the government of Theresa May, a brand new British naval base, where naval assets from both countries shelter. Now, Bahrain is a very small place. It's the size of a very large car park. And in that car park, you have the possibility of hitting British, American, Saudi, and Bahraini targets in a way which can obliterate Bahrain as an independent state. My logic is that that is the place where Iran will strike. But wherever it is, it will be responded to, according to Donald Trump on Twitter, without hesitation, in moments. And then we've got a very big quagmire, a very big bonfire indeed. Because when Donald Trump responds, Iran will respond again, and Donald Trump will respond again, and Iran will respond again. The Straits of Hormuz will be closed and on fire. The Saudi oil fields, perhaps on fire. The Qatari and Emirati oil fields on fire. You won't be able to buy a barrel of oil by that time at any price. And so the international economy will come crunching to a halt. And that's before you factor in what the attitude will be of Iran's friends. Its big friends, Russia and China, and its smaller friends, Hezbollah in Syria and in Lebanon. Its friends in the Palestinian resistance in Gaza and elsewhere. You feel me? I'm not necessarily talking about World War III, but I am talking about war throughout the world. And if that isn't enough to make you sit up straight and pay attention, I really don't know what would. This is the mother of all talk shows.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik.